And welcome to this week's edition of Conversations. I'm Jeff DeForrest. I've been looking forward to this for some time now. I started following this guy again on his Facebook page, and I realized talk about jogging memories. I was telling a story this morning. We introduced you to the great Phil Hendrie, now a Radio Hall of Famer, and a guy that back in the day when radio was radio here in South Florida, where we originate from. WIOD, I was part of a phenomenal lineup, and without question, the guy that provided the greatest hysterics ever. And I consider him to be the best ever to do this. Joining us here on a show. I was telling Luby, my producer of our morning show here on Bleacher Brothers, Phil Hendrie. And by the way, how are you? You look terrific, my man.
Oh, thanks. I feel good. I don't think I look all that good, but I do feel good. I do feel good. That's 90% of it. But thanks, Tifo. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So one day I'm smoking a joint outside. We were working at 940, Luby and I, for many, many years together doing morning
Okay.
drive. And I used to burn a couple before. This was before gummy bears were popular in edibles, although I used to make my own also.
Yeah.
And we noticed that like the program director's car was in the parking lot, and he always came in this side entrance. And I said, Luby, this reminds me of the time I had just gotten the permanent job. It's had to be circa 1992. It was right after Hurricane Andrew. And I had just gotten a job at WIOD as a sports talk host, 6 to 8. It was an iconic position. Sports talk
Yeah.
radio hadn't expanded to where you had a lot of 24-hour sports radio stations. So this was the seat that you wanted to have if you're doing sports in town. And you remember Big Al Winters, Phil, who was working at the Coast?
No, yeah. I still talk to Al. Yeah. Yeah.
Great guy. Yeah, he got
Wonderful
into
guy. Yeah.
like jazz radio in Atlanta after, and I used to spend a lot of time with Al, and he had also just signed a contract at the Coast. So
Hmm.
we're outside about 8 o'clock. Our shifts both ended at the same time, and we're burning one outside the security door there at WIOD, looking out at Biscayne Bay. And all of a sudden, 11 cop cars from Bay Village or whatever that is
Bay
pull
Village.
up.
Yeah.
They pull up in the parking lot, and they come rushing to the door. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, fuck. I just got this job, and now we're going to get fired for smoking weed outside the radio station. They blow right by us and take a
Okay.
battering ram to the security door, and they go running in there. And what was happening? Phil Hendrie was supposedly interviewing Arlex Fuentes, the escaped
That's it.
convict who had just got away
Yeah.
from like the Chrome detention center. And they actually thought they were duped into thinking that he was in the studio with you talking about his aspirations to join the celebrity golf tour.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
I'll never forget that moment. I'm thinking, wow, to buffalo people to that extent. When and what I loved about your show is you would continue to make the character more and more absurd in his pronouncements, including this business about the celebrity golf tour. But how on earth did you come up with the concept? Because we used to watch you do this in the studio, and it literally was pissing your pants funny to see you on a telephone being a character, and then the character, whoever it was, whatever he was talking about, whether it was a business guy, an escaped convict, some lady that was complaining about the restaurants, whoever it was, you had to speak down perfectly. I mean, if you were a Huizinga henchman, the business talk was exactly something that a Huizinga henchman would say. So,
yeah.
how did you get that thing going? And were you doing that at any of your previous stops on the tour?
Well, yeah, I was a disc jockey, Depot. Like I had that life for about 17 years, and I was very, very bad at it. And I did morning drive, and I sucked at it. And I thought, I know I got talent for this, man, because I thought of dropping out a few times, becoming a photographer. I took art classes, and I got into acting classes. And I said, but Henry, you got talent. So one day I was listening to KBC radio here in LA, and there was a guy named Bill Pearl, who's a very talented disc jockey, and then became a talk show host. But he's reading an interview of Saddam Hussein in a newspaper. But what he did was when he got to Saddam's voice, he filtered his voice so it sounded like, yes, that's right, I did that. And is it true you did this? Yes, I did. And I thought, I could actually do Saddam's voice. Let me try that. So I went back and forth as that. And yeah, I did it very well. It was a facility that I developed somewhere as a child, maybe, as I was doing comedy or trying to do comedy. So I began to do these voices back and forth. When I got this gig at KVEN in Ventura up the road here from where I'm living right now, I came on the air and I did this character named Raj Faneen. And they saying this was during the Gulf Shield. Remember the build up to the Gulf
Yeah.
Storm, the Gulf War. So I'm doing this voice, and my producer, a guy named Greg, what is Greg's last name anyway? Good guy, Greg,
Sure.
the immortal Greg. And he's waving his hands. He goes, there's people that want to talk to the Iraqi. And so I said, put him through. And that's how it started. And the first guy on there says, I'm driving through your burg here. I don't know, or even know where I am. And I'm listening to you. You say that Saddam Hussein, just because they won't order, are you saying because they won't honor your American Express, you're being tortured? That was that's what that happened to me in America. You say Saddam, but I come to America, I have a silver card, supposedly no limit, and they won't honor this. And I don't know, this got it got more absurd. And I found out that you could manipulate people by ratcheting it up slowly. Start out with something serious, and we
Right.
did. We started the Iraq War and how bad you people are treating President Bush, and how bad you're treating Saddam Hussein, and President Bush is really the war criminal, and that's going to piss people off. You know that. Then once you get them in, then you start dropping in things like, and also, what'd you do to Sitting Bull? And this guy's like, what do you mean Sitting Bull? What's that got to do with anything? You know?
And that
So
was you coming back with that.
I was coming back with Sitting
Yeah.
Bull. You Americans, you treat Saddam Hussein, Sitting Bull. This guy over here, what's his name? Jimmy Hoffa, whatever. The guy that's buried in the freeway here. So that is the day I said, well, hell, it was going to be fun doing voices, but we can actually take calls. So it
Yes.
started with Ventura, and I kept, and that's when I began to develop characters that have been with me to this day. That I do, and we started doing an hour for each character. No, excuse me, I was doing all 4 hours for each character until I got to Miami. And when I got to DOD, I said, no, Phil, 1 hour per character. That's the way to do it, and that worked solid. This
It
hour
was
we had this.
beautiful.
Yeah. So, and I remember the night you're talking about because I'll never get the Bay Village cop walking into the control room next to Andy, and he's like this, just. So you're
Just
doing
nobody cared.
just stick, man. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your evening. Okay, no, that's fine. I got to hand it to the cops. They were all right with it, And it
Yeah.
got to the point. Cops actually got to like me. And it got to this point, DeForrest, when I was at Minneapolis at WCCO. There's a cop one night. Don't ask me why, but I pretended I was morphing into a werewolf. Okay, so there's a bang on the door. I go down to the door, the front on 6th Street in downtown Minneapolis. The cops, you all right, Phil? Yeah, okay, fine, thanks. That's it, Some lady had called and said the guy on the radio was turning into a werewolf. So
The stuff was beyond brilliant and way ahead of its time. And I don't know that anybody's been able to pull this off yet. You mentioned the guy that you sort of got the idea from, but nobody's ever done it like you, where
well,
you
Billy
you
wasn't
are
doing.
the host, you are the guest, and as you said, getting increasingly more absurd as the interview moved forward, and then you're taking calls from people that are astounded that somebody has the audacity to say this shit on the air.
Yeah, yeah.
It reminded me. I was talking about this with a friend of mine before we started the show here. It was saying that he was a big Phil Hendrie admirer, and I said it kind of reminded me when I was out in North Hollywood. I was dating the unknown comic's sister, Murray Langston,
Murray
for many,
Langston.
many years, and he had a club in North Hollywood called the Showbiz, which these comedians that were on the circuit, all starving artists at that point, and it included like Letterman, Robin Williams, and I remember Andy Kaufman on a Tuesday night in front of 3 drunks that had just come
Whoa.
in, maybe from the Valley somewhere, and nobody understood the guy. He would get up there, and that was when he was doing that Mighty Mouse thing where you have this
Yeah, yeah,
record on the player, and he just mouthed the words to "Here I come to save the day."
yeah.
And
Super absurd.
people who are literally, I mean, huge comic fans, and even guys that would eventually make it big in the comedy world thought, "Who the fuck is this guy? What's he doing?" Did you get a lot of that reaction in the beginning stages of when you were pulling this act off?
Yeah, I got a lot of complaints for the radio station. Got lots of complaints, but you begin to also develop your fan base. But right away, people get it. But every stop along the way, from Ventura, when I went to Atlanta, when I got to Minneapolis, when I got to Miami, and especially when I got to LA, every stop along the way, people wanted me fired. People thought I was irresponsible. We got a recording. In fact, my friend Jonah Weiland had a recording of a woman that called KFI Los Angeles, and we put her on the air. She didn't know. She's like, "This man Hendrie, get him off, please get him off." And and I have to tell you this. There are people that come to me today and say, "Phil, I've been a big fan, man. God, when you first started, I didn't quite get it." I said, "I'll bet you were one of the people who tried to get me fired, man." Because a lot of those people became fans. But yeah, I got depressed when I got back to LA in '96. I was really depressed because I was getting hit pretty heavy. I mean, the Orange County Register ran a column that said he won't last
Very conservative. I mean, it's a bastion of conservatism down there.
Orange County, yeah, and there were people. It's the first market I've ever been in where I actually got hate mail from fellow radio personalities.
General managers sending you hate mail into your.
Yeah, I was feeling bad, man. Like, but I got through it. Yeah,
No, it's great.
it can get to be it's a lot of fun. But yeah, you every time you try things that are new, man, people will dislike you for it, I think.
This was beyond innovative. I mean, nobody's done
Yeah,
anything like it. As you mentioned before, and certainly since. A couple of the ones I remember from the WIOD days, though, were classics. And you just were a master at putting people on and knowing which hot buttons to push to get that
yeah.
kind of reaction out of them, where they were calling the station switchboard and basically knocking it off the air there because they were getting flooded so heavily. But you had the guy, the Huizinga henchman, that was talking about cloud seeding over the stadium so they could sell more ponchos, and that was.
Yeah, that sounds about
I
right. I
think
don't
he became a
remember.
frequent
Yeah,
guest on your show about
yeah.
various Huizinga issues. Who was not the most
We,
favorite of characters at the time in town.
one we did that I remember is that they had legalized sodomy was no longer illegal in, I think, Florida. And we had a chamber of commerce guy, and this is going to be a boon to tourism, Phil. Because sodomy is no longer. Yeah, I hate to say it, but yes, there's more people. More people will be coming to our state. It's not for me to judge. I understand, sir, but we are making big plans. The hotels are going to be full just because sodomy's legal, and that got calls, man. Because I
Yeah,
think you got to sell it like it's real. In other words, what I used to say to people is, walk. To me, the funniest humor is that walks the line of reality. Walk that
yes.
line of reality. Sell it as if it's real. And here's the thing: if it is real, most people will know it's crazy. So I would say this is really crazy, right? It does seem hard to believe, Phil, but we're seeing the numbers go up when it was, and you make it sound.
It was so absurd. It was beautiful.
It's ridiculous, man. Yeah, and
And you would demurely pull it off, as the host and the intermediary between the angry
yeah,
callers and the character that you were
yeah.
on the show. And you would have thought, wow, this moderator is right down the middle
Yeah.
here.
Well, I always took the side of the caller. Always took the side of the caller. Caller's like, "This is ridiculous, Phil." I understand. Yes, it is. Bill, then I go back to my character. How can you say these things? So you always took the side of the audience so that they knew that we're piling on a weird ass. Who is this guy that you have? Yeah. So, and then the other one we did was Alex Fuentes was my very first night on the air at WIOD.
I thought it was going to be my last night on the air because of you.
Was that your first night too?
No, I had been there as a part timer,
Yeah.
and right around Hurricane Andrew, I was ready to go to another radio station. I was offered like a
Right.
spot with the new all sports station, WQAM.
Right.
So I was going to be part of their morning drive show, and at the last second, everybody was kind of, locked into the radio station during the Hurricane Andrew coverage, and the general manager Bob Green and Gary Bruce, the program director, they were like there. It seemed like 24 hours. So I thought, well, let me just take a shot, let them know when I'm leaving. I'll drive down there and see what their reaction is. And they
Yeah.
told me, no, never mind. We're going to go ahead and make you. We have big plans for you. We think you're really good,
You're
and
hired, man. Yeah. Cool.
we're going to get rid of Joe Zagacki, who was hosting the show at the time, and it wasn't the most inspiring of broadcasters, you would have to say. And
Yeah.
sure enough, that day that I'm walking out of the station to my car, and I hear the announcement made that Zagacki had been in a plane crash, and it was the first time I really got a vision of how cruel this fucking business can be,
Oh my
because
God.
they called me right away, not to say, "Hey, I hope Zagacki's okay," and be nice if you went and visited him in the hospital. They said, "Listen, everything's staying on track. You're going to be the host. Don't worry about a thing. We'll take care of Zagacki." They didn't even give a shit that the guy was nearly dead. So
Oh
I
man.
thought, well, someday they're going to come back and get me in the same fashion.
Yeah,
You know what it's
I
like.
guess they got to keep pushing, don't they? They just got to keep pushing. Yeah. I don't know. I was very nervous going at WI because I always felt WIOD was one of the top personality. We used to say it's personality talk, not news talk.
Sure.
And I knew they had some heavy hitters. Neil being the top cat, who I
Neil
still think
Rogers, right.
he's my favorite. Rest his soul. But when I got to Miami, I was on at night, and then I heard that rather than rip me a new ass, which is what he basically did to everybody, Neil had said on the air, "Hey, this guy Hendrie's not bad. He's pretty funny."
Yeah. Yeah, which was
And
a
I
giant
know, oh,
thumbs
man.
up.
dude, I made that hurdle,
Yeah.
and then I found out that Neil had gone to Bob and said, "This is the guy you should have an afternoon drive," and
Nice.
that's what happened. Yeah. So we thank goodness for Neil, and that was a load off my mind, and from that point forward, we were just all, you swing for the fences every day, man. You look for something whack to do. What like Margaret Gray, that character was invented in Miami. And I found out that I could do a high chest voice and actually sound like a woman. So I'm like, well, Phil, so the voice is up here, Jeff, and she'd say, I'm Margaret, I'm in Bal Harbor, Phil. Yeah. We've got a lot of these Cubans that are just washing up. I don't know. There's boats out here. Do you see them, Frank? Yeah. And they're washing up. you know. And so she started baiting the Cuban community and the whole, flotilla of people that was all the news in those days. So she became pretty well known to people, and yeah, we developed a real group of characters. Another one was this guy named Harvey Wireman, who he was like a South Florida attorney, and
Oh, that guy was great. Yeah,
yeah,
legend.
I'm Harvey Wireman. I feel well. I owned a couple of strip bars down here, and I remember, yeah, I remember Larry King coming in. He was a wonderful man, generous man.
And you had a book kind of like this look, I'm not a big is like 10 minutes into the show. And I
Yeah,
remember you used to sit in the office there, and I thought, wow, this guy's a real pro, because you had like a giant book full of notes. And I would
yeah,
imagine one of the great things about doing this for a living is essentially you're getting paid to make your observations about life. You're walking around,
yeah,
you're seeing different people, you're studying their antics, whether it's degenerate gamblers that I talk about all the time,
yeah.
or general characters like you developed. But how hard did you have to work on this? And you mentioned you got depressed when you went out to L.A. I mean, you had to be in a pretty good move to come up with this stuff. But what kind of drugs were you on at the time? Or you were doing this on that?
No, I was just I haven't, I haven't used drugs since my early 20s. That's the honest statement.
It
But I
seems
did,
impossible to have this imagination without
yeah,
some kind of
right.
yeah.
I work my ass off, and I always do, because I figure unless you're doing that, I would feel guilty, like I'm stealing money, like this can't be this easy. And sometimes it was. Sometimes the ideas, as you got to know people, as you got to know the radio audience, as you got to know how people reacted to things, you suddenly realize you had pockets of real responsive callers. Pilots were great.
Yeah.
Children was always a huge topic. I had a pilot, Art Griego, Phil, and this was a killer. This got hits all the time. Phil, we really don't know why airplanes fly. We do know we can get them into here. I did a whole hour on that. I had pilots calling up. I don't know how you got a license, but I can tell you right now, I know how a plane flies. Well, all right, you can go ahead and lie to the people, but you know as well as I do. And and pilots, parents, any topic having to do with kids. Like I had a character named Justin McElroy, who was kind of based on a lot of teenagers that I'd seen and everything. And he'd say, my mom's friends are kind of like hogs, and they won't, well, what's going on? They won't leave me alone. They're touching me and everything. And it was like, that was just weird as hell.
Very
So,
much on the line, yeah, approaching
yeah.
darkness.
But you find out where people respond. Yeah, the areas they respond to.
Well, you were also great at trolling sports fans, and of course, WIOD had a giant sports presence. It's funny
Oh my
because
God. Yeah.
we had
Yeah.
there's a booklet somebody started circulating on social media. It's a picture of the six guys that were in the sports department at the time. It was me and Zagacki were the two young guys. They had Rick Weaver, the Dolphin
Oh yeah.
play-by-play guy, Jim Mad Dog Manich, Sonny Hirsch, Hank Goldberg. And I'm
Wow.
looking at this pamphlet thinking there was one of those, they briefly put out a booklet to promote the radio station, and we were like the last guys to get our selves featured in this book. I think you might have been first, or Neil. They had to
Well, there's a
capitulate.
picture of you and me playing OJ in the Bronco. You remember that?
Yes, yes, that's right.
That was
You were
that
in the
was
back
that.
with a gun to your head.
Yeah, exactly. You were driving. Yeah. Yeah.
But
I think
was it? I mean, I want to say, and it's turned out to be a real guy. Was it Booger McFarland, the guy that you had that was
Brad the Booger Belmonte, and this
Brad
voice
the
I
Booger Belmonte?
got, right, and
And
this
you
guy
would have these Dolphin fans, I'm just
going crazy.
absolutely livid, to the
Yeah.
point where it was surprising they didn't storm the radio station, much like the January 6th people stormed the Capitol building, which they did, of course. We
We
didn't see
actually had him. He went to a Dolphin listener party at the stadium. Dolphin fans cheering, I think you guys are doing the pre-show, this, that. And right on stage, they bring my ass up in these big Zuba pants and Buffalo Bill gear. Hey, how you doing? Buffalo Bills, and we got 4 really brave listeners to come up and sing this Buffalo Bills song. I don't know. That was a guy all these characters that were based on real people. When I first got to Miami, I was staying in Hollywood Beach at the Hilton Hotel there. I went across the street, and there was a guy who had a store, and you want a knish? What do you want? This is exactly what he sounded like. And do you want a knish? What do you want? And so that's the guy. That's the cat that I based that character on. Big dude with a ball cap on and a ponytail. Crazy.
Yeah, it was classic, and the people legitimately. I mean, we would speak of getting hate mail. We'd get it in the sports department. How could you put that Monty on the air? What the fuck is that? And it was classic. Had you had the people looped in. Now, how did things evolve? You go to KFI. I didn't realize that you went there for a weekend gig, which seems kind of odd, although it is the LA market. And then,
well, that was my first at bat. When I went to LA from IOD, it was for a full-time job.
Okay.
But my very first time at KFI was in 89, 90 when I got out of being a disc jockey, and they offered me a weekend. It was very traditional talk radio. I had guests and shit and whatever, dude, and I got out of that. I think I got fired. And
how torturous was that for you to do? I mean, I can't see you doing a show that
it was horrible. It was horrible. I hated it. I knew I wasn't any good at it. I knew I could do better. And when I got this job at KVN, I said, I'm just going to let it all hang out, man. I'm just going to do what is instinctive. And that's when the voices started coming out, the characters started coming out. And that's where the show really started. And then we didn't get a lot of calls. Now, here's the great thing about that, though. Right as I got on the air at KVEN was Desert Shield going into Desert Storm. So for a little small market like Ventura, California, with 600,000 people, we were getting calls. And
nice.
You don't really get calls, in a market that size.
No, or even this size at the end of the
yeah. I had a great program director named Rich Galano said to me, Phil, just prep your show every day like you're not going to get one phone call. Okay,
Yes.
We were able to bait people with the whole Gulf War thing. And then I just had to construct shows every day of different characters and different scenarios and bullshit like that. And I would get in my car and drive around with a remote microphone. I got fired from that gig, but right as I got fired, I got hired in Atlanta, WSB. Jim Ashbury was my program director in Atlanta, and in Minneapolis, that guy saved my ass twice.
I love that one. You need a lifeline like that in this business.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. In fact, in Nashville, when we did the Hall of Fame thing, I said, does anybody know where Jim Ashbury is? I'd love to just say thank to this guy because he.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went to Atlanta from Ventura, and that was my and guess what happened when I got to Atlanta? Another big story just broke. It was the Rodney King beating by the LAPD. Yeah. So each town I got to, at least in the beginning, some huge story was happening that was driving calls and people's emotions. And so I kind of lucked out that way,
You'd always teeing up on that. Now you became very innovative in your business approach also. So give the fans out there and our audience a little bit of the evolution of how you progressed from going back to LA after your gig at WIOD, and then you ended up starting a website. You ended up getting ownership of that. You've got subscribers around the world. How did all of that come about? And how did some business advisor, or usually like the lamest negotiators and business people, being on the so-called talent end of this racket, what was the inspiration for that, and how did it come about?
Well, I was on the air at KFI, and then I was on the air at Premier Radio. So my show was being syndicated by Clear Channel, Premier Radio Networks. And the radio business was doing one of these, and my show was, as successful as we were, my show was always very tough to affiliate. It was always very tough to sign up advertisers. So what happened was the website was started for the radio show, and the company, Craig Kitchen, bless his heart, gave me the material. He said, you can take it, Phil. It's yours. He just gave it to me. So I got the website and I got my archived material. And that's when I started to do a daily podcast. I don't know what the hell I was doing. I started doing it like it was a show, like a 3-hour radio show. But I realized, well, you don't have to do 3 hours. Most podcasts are like 30 minutes maybe. But I had to learn that, over time. But we had subscribers. So we pushed the subscriptions, and we pushed the fact that you could get all the archived radio material. That was the big thing. And this was 2008, man, when there was a real recession on it, but our business was starting to grow. And so we started doing that. I got more and more voiceover jobs, and then I started getting acting jobs, which I figured that's probably where it ought to be, because I don't know how much longer radio is going to last, and you and I
Uh-huh.
both know radio is taken it on the chin here in recent years. So between voiceover, between acting, and doing the daily podcast on my website, that became my career. And the website is the most consistent moneymaker of all the things I do. Every month, every day, there's subscription dollars coming in. We do a daily podcast, and it is a satirical podcast. It doesn't have phone calls or anything, but we just rely more. Like today, I did these two characters. I have Ted Bell of Ted's of Beverly Hills and the chef Carl Chedilia here. And you remember Kendrick Lamar was at the Super Bowl?
Yes.
Kendrick Lamar had a hit record called "Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe," and at
Okay.
one point, Ted Bell had said to Chef Chedilia, "Bitch, get in the kitchen," and that wound up a fist fight. So I had to break up another fight between them. He says, "He doesn't say, 'Bitch, get back in the kitchen.' I didn't say, 'Bitch, get in the kitchen.' I said, 'Bitch, don't kill my vibe.'" So that was today's podcast.
That's classic stuff. Now, how can people subscribe to that? Because I would
Oh,
imagine your legions of followers around the country, and especially here in South Florida, where we originate from, would want to take advantage of that.
yeah, it's
How do we
philhendrieshow.com.
get your picks? It's like talking to a handicapper. How do we get your selections? I know you're 0 for 15 this year, but how do we get your picks?
Yeah, it's philhendrieshow.com, and you can just sign up there. And I also started doing a live theater show. I'm doing 2 shows this weekend at Theater West in Hollywood called The Galaxy of Phil Hendrie. I get on stage and do characters. And somebody said to me, and I've done one other. So I did one at UCB, which is an improv theater here in LA, and I've done one more, and I'm going to do 2. And people are saying, well, this is kind of the future. And it feels like that. But in any event, the reason why I bring it up is they said, well, why don't you do a show in Florida, man? And I'm like, it's a logical thing to do because there's a great fan base in Miami. I just don't know I know that Miami has a couple of improv nightclubs,
Yes.
comedy clubs. So I would love to book our show in there. It's me in character doing a variety of different characters and doing shtick that way. So yeah, that's we do what we can, Defo. We
No,
just
I mean, it's
do
a
what we
tremendous
can.
evolution, and the whole idea of owning your own material was a foreign concept back then.
Yeah, yeah, and it was so foreign that I met at the NAB one year, and a guy walks up to me and says, "That's great. I listen to your show every day. Where? Well, it's over on iTunes on the Gary Glebe network." I go, "Well, what is he doing with my material? I own that." "Oh, I don't know. This guy's a station owner, so this guy owns a radio station. But as far as rights to material, when it comes to radio, guys, forget it, man." So we've had to
What's
do a lot of.
Now I was going to say, what were some of the shows you were on? I mean, I was reading about it on Wikipedia. It's a pretty high volume of shows that you were both voiceover and a character voice in, and also appearing as an actor.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was doing the show, Jeff, I'm in LA, and so you have a lot of show business people there, and they're listening. And I got a call from Trey Parker and Matt Stone. They were doing a movie called World Police, Team America. Well, you want to come over and do a voice? I said, yeah, fuck yeah. I like how they just kind of circumvented. They went around my agent. They just called me direct. But,
Oh, you have an agent? That used to be taboo in the radio business.
oh
You have
yeah,
an
yeah,
agent, the guy would
yeah,
walk, right? As soon
yeah.
as you said yes.
I know general managers say I don't talk to agents. But yeah, so I did the voice on Team America, and then I got hired to do a lot of, King of the Hill. I did 8 years on King of the Hill, and
Nice.
for Mike Judge is a terrific guy. And then I also did a little Futurama with Matt Groening. I created the characters. Waterfall is just sort of a surf, a sun-baked surf dude, this kind of shit. But that was the same voice I did in Team America. It was Intelligence, the computer. Intelligence, where are they? Right now, I think they're out in the desert, Mr. Hopkins, or somewhere like that. And this is the computer talking. So then I got the gig at Rick and Morty, which has been a big residual check, man. That show
Nice.
is just kicked ass, brother. And then, when I started getting camera jobs, my first stuff I wasn't too happy with. I'm not really a camera. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, man, on camera. But I was on New Girl and some shows like that. And when I started to get serious about it and actually, put some energy into it, I got hired to be on Grace and Frankie, which was scary as hell, man, because I was in a scene with Martin Sheen and Sam Waterston,
Wow.
and I couldn't sleep the night before, man, thinking about that shit. Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, I just went in. I said, just be who you are, Phil, and that was great. They were two terrific guys to work with, and then recently I did a Grey's Anatomy with Donna Pescow. You remember Saturday Night Fever?
Yes,
The,
of course.
the little brunette that was John
Oh, that
Travolta's
was
first.
getting stiff by Travolta.
Yeah, that was Donna. And I
Wow.
said, you were the hottest. I told her, I said, you were the hottest chick in that movie. Oh, shut up. You were the hottest chick in that damn movie. Yeah. So, but things are changing now. There are not as many gigs out there for actors. They're doing much more streaming. They've cut back on production because they've got too much material. They're hiring in-house. So you see a lot of actors working, but these are people that have done a lot of work. So I haven't done an audition in a long time, man. So I don't know. But I'm happy because I'm doing this live show. I have my website. I have my voiceover working,
You're kicking ass. Well, you should be. And congratulations. How did it
thanks, man.
feel to be inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame? That had to be quite a distinction.
Yeah, I told Craig Kitchen, who was my boss at Premiere and is on the board. I said, he said, Phil, you have been nominated for the Radio Hall of Fame. I said, well, that's very nice, Craig. I haven't got a snowball's chance in hell of getting into the Radio Hall of Fame, but I thank you very much. And he said, well, I wouldn't really. I really didn't think I had a shot because I think that I was too countercultural for the radio establishment, But I'll be a son of a bitch if they said you didn't, you're in, which was that really surprised me. Still does. But then again, who knows, man? So
should have been first ballot. No doubt about it. All right,
First
speaking of
ballot.
Hall of Famers, and he's part of our Radio Legends series here on the program today, which was a concept I just kind of conceived as you came on, Phil Hendrie. I don't know if you remember this gentleman because he was about 200 pounds heavier when you knew him.
Jeez,
Paul
is that
Castronovo. I remember Paulie and I used to be the only two guys that used the elevator to get. We were in the Waco Combine there.
Yeah, one story.
And he came in about the same time I did, like 2 minutes to showtime.
I'm just so delighted that Phil Hendrie chose to not do mornings as my career was starting in Miami.
Oh,
yes.
What a treat.
I could never have done mornings doing this shit. I could never have done mornings, Paul. I would have been like, where am I? Yeah.
So when you were on IOD, I think it was like 94, somewhere in there. I was just coming into my own in Miami. We were building the Paul and Young Ron show. And about 95, we really hit and took off. But, I didn't have to compete with you. Howard Stern had just left. It was the timing was Herman and McBean had left. The timing was right. So, yeah, we had that was a while ago. I get what?
I remember you guys did real good in mornings there, man. And
he's still doing it in a dead industry. Phil.
Yeah, I'm still alive.
In a dead industry.
Don't remind them. They just came to me and they said, "Hey, I just turned 65." They go, "You want to do another deal?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I have no other skills. If I want to." I ran into Dan Levitard the other night at a dinner party, and Levitard, I go, "Please rescue me. Get me into the your podcast world." And he goes, "Dude, you're the last man standing. Ride it till the freaking end, man."
He's probably right, man. But Levitard, what about him, man?
Monster.
Holy, he's
unbelievable. Yeah,
super.
I remember hearing his early entries on the radio, and I thought, how the fuck did this guy get on the air? He was a great writer.
We talked about it the other day.
On the weekends on ESPN, and I thought this is garbage. I mean, and then being in the business, you can be critical of other people without necessarily spewing the kind of hatred that some of the listeners or the callers might. But you just going, this guy sucks. And then he developed into the monster that he is. But Paulie Man and I used to take the elevator up to the second floor there at the Waco Combine, and I remember because I was about 50 pounds heavier also. And I remembered, I always looked at the capacity, the weight capacity. It was the only time you ever noticed.
You and I were in the elevator, right?
And then we would get off and go our separate ways. And I didn't feel as guilty about taking the elevator up the stairs there because it was only one flight of stairs, Phil. But
the two of you guys, so you checked the weight capacity just
to make sure that the two of us weren't going to sink this thing. Man. Titanic.
I really forgot about that. Yeah, I figured it out. And during the pandemic, when everybody else was putting on 100 pounds, I just decided, all right, maybe now because they kept saying fat guys were dying with the COVID, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be. I got kids. I don't want to, a wife. I don't want to be that guy. So yes, I turned it around.
Oh,
And,
noble. I
You
mean,
believe, man, I was 300 pounds at one point, Jeff. I got back to LA,
so
and then
Pink's
yeah,
Hot Dogs probably did you in.
I don't know what I
Is
did,
that
but
guy
when I
with
got
the taco
divorced, I got
stand
divorced.
still on Sunset Boulevard, though? There was an old guy, and he sold cheeseburgers and tacos, and they were dynamite. And I remember one of my favorite radio guys from L.A. was a guy named Elmer Dills, believe it or not, who was
Oh,
the
Elmer,
food
yeah, yeah,
critic
yeah. He's a
for
food
the
guy.
L.A.
Yeah.
Times. And what was great about him, he knew everything about every. It didn't matter what shithole hole in the wall you were talking about. That person would call up and go, "Well, you know what? I wouldn't order anything from the right side of the menu, but left is good." You're like, how do you even know about this place? It was great, but yeah, LA was
Elmer
fantastic.
Dills
It
was
was easy to gain weight there because some of the best food was sold at like greasy
dude,
stands.
it's easy to gain weight anywhere. Are you kidding
Yeah,
me?
well, that's true.
At a certain age, there's nothing left. It's just food. I mean, what else?
But then I got to look. Then I got to look at myself. And when I saw myself at 300 pounds, I thought that it was a manipulated photograph. I thought, oh, that can't be me. Yeah, it fucking is, Jack.
Done by
Mentally, you're right.
Argentine.
Because mentally, you think you're still the kid you were in high school, and then
Oh,
you're
yeah.
like, oh crap. You just
You don't
keep buying
realize how it's creeping
bigger
up.
clothes. Yeah.
Yeah, but the longevity is great. I had a Lifeline guy too, and Paulie, man, you probably know him. Phil was talking about how this one program director saved him a couple of times from extinction on the air. My guy was a guy named Steve Lappa who recently checked out. And
Oh,
every time I did like two different shifts with this guy where he pulled me out of nowhere. I was in a jackpot at one time. He gave me a job, and then I was just kind of scrounging around between jobs, and he put me on the air. But we refer to it as radio purgatory because you were stuck there until somebody would get you out of the situation. At least with your guy, Phil, it was somebody that was always going to bring you to some level of prominence, and you didn't have to
Yeah.
take another step. No, we didn't all have the magic carpet ride that Paul Castronovo did,
Right.
where he gets one
I
job,
gotta hand
he's
it to
still
you.
on it 40 years later.
I admire, man. I admire cats like you, Paul, because here in LA at KFI, there's cats that have been there 30 years, man. KFI, Bill Handel, 30
Unbelievable.
years.
Yeah.
Where does that happen? My longest gig was when a show was syndicated for like 9 years over at Premiere. But my hat's off to anybody that can hang on to a job.
Phil, I decided, I really wanted to do your trajectory. I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. That didn't happen. The next thing was I didn't know the path to get there. I won the Budweiser Young Comedians thing. I was trying to do a stand up. I got heckled for the first time, and I said, okay, that's not for me. I'd been doing college radio, and then someone said to me, you got to marry your market. And Mark and Brian had taken off in LA, and I was like, okay, LA has my kind of show already. Howard was in New York, and I'm like, Miami's probably a pretty good place to be. Herman and McBean had just left the market, and I said, all right, I listen, I'm a Florida kid. I was born in Brooklyn, but I love South Florida. I'm a fisherman, a surfer, a diver. I'm like, if I could be the guy in Miami, I'm just going to someone said, marry your market. So for the first 20-something years of my career, I hosted every fucking event. I did every bar gig. I did everything. Then I started to figure out how to do radio. And at a time, I was doing music. And then I had, you mentioned program directors. I've had 24 in my career. It's ridiculous.
12 of those were in the last 3 years.
But I've had a few really good ones. And the first guy that said to me, hey, man, you got to stop playing music. You're going to be bigger than the music. And I was like, fucking stop playing music. What are you talking about? And I remember the first day we did it, and I was panicking. I'm like, what am I going to do? And then all of a sudden, you just figure it out.
You find stuff to do, man, and it's fun. You find out fun stuff to do, and you're having a good time. The audience starts to have a good time too,
Yeah,
so,
and the ratings went through the roof, and and it was also a time where the alternative active rock movement, like the Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots, that was starting to happen. So there was a whole young crowd that kind of came up with me, and now I'm playing 80s schlock again. So I don't know what's going on in the music. Yeah, I just listen. I'm going to ride it out, like they said.
Yeah.
Who's the most bizarre program director you ever worked for, Phil? I mean, give us some of his characteristics. Because and then the other thing, Paulie, you mentioned ratings, which obviously were always being sort of like a sword of Damocles held over the head of any talent. You could
now it's revenue. Now it's all revenue.
To a point, and the guy takes the book and just drops it on the table with a big thud and says, "What are you going to do about this?" I remember Don Cox telling me, the great Cox on the radio. I worked with him for about a year on I-95 down here, and he told me, "You know what you need to do, kid? you need to learn how to read one of these. And it was a ratings book. What was that ever critical? I mean, I know, Polyman, you're always being pressured by this with the iHeart people, but Phil, did you have to deal with that?
Oh, fuck yeah, man. I mean, at KFI, when I was on at night during the summer, I was up against the Dodgers. This is the summer. My first summer in Los Angeles was summer of '97.
Do you do
And I
Vince
remember
Scully? You do some Scully? You're probably going
Vince
to
Scully was
convince
doing,
people the game was on your station.
I mean, I could have done the game, I suppose, but
Yeah.
I remember I was on vacation in Mexico with my wife, and all I could talk about was ratings. And she's like, "Oh, for Christ's sake, can we have a vacation?" When we finally got back, we get out at LAX. We're driving home. I get on the phone with David Hall. He goes, "You kicked ass in the numbers. You're great, man. You beat the Dodgers." And I hear my wife go, "Well, thank God."
I don't have to hear about
Ruined
this
the goddamn vacation. I think that was actually when the Dodgers and baseball on radio in LA, at least, was beginning to do one of these, and TV became the thing, because baseball on the radio in Los Angeles was huge, especially with a cat like Vince
Oh,
Scully.
everybody's in their car, too, stuck in traffic.
It was monstrous. So to beat
Something
them
about ratings.
Yeah.
True story. My wife, years ago, 20 years ago, she was in a terrible car accident, right? She's fine, but I mean, when it happened, she was in an ER and it was touch and go. And I remember we were laying, she's laying in the hospital bed in intensive care, and the TV is on in the room, and they're doing a news story. The wife of radio personality Paul Castronovo is in intensive care right now, car accident. She leans over, she goes, "I'm sorry it didn't happen in the spring book."
She did not. She did.
I swear on my life, man.
Awesome. That's awesome.
I married the right girl.
That's awesome.
That's a true story, Phil.
I'm going to tell that story now. I'm going to tell that story forever, man.
It's honest to God true.
And you're thinking, if it wasn't for the bonehead mistakes, almost like being Dolphins management, that you guys have been making in the front office here, in the general manager's office and the program director's office, things would be fine. They were good until you got involved, and then all of a sudden, that was another Don Coxism that I remember, and that is, don't freak the talent. He was not an advocate of the guy coming in the middle of your show and saying, "If you don't play Stairway to Heaven right now, you're fucking fired."
Right.
I had a guy hotline. The hotline is the nightmare of every radio guy. These PDs would call you on the hotline. "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What are you doing?"
I mean, we have to say this. The radio business today has lost its footing because of management, because of ownership, because of the money guys, not because of talent. They told us for years, if you guys are just, toe the line, no. You assholes fucked this business up. We could have married it to the new media. We could have married it to social media. It could have been a monstrosity. But instead, all these geniuses, some of the biggest names in the business sort of just took our industry and just, who knows what would have happened. But I do know it wasn't because of the talent. And
a decade ago, I stood up at a morning show convention. It was 700 to 1,000 morning shows in the room, and all these giant executives from every company were up on the dais, and they're like, "Well, what do you guys think we should do?" I said, "Well, you're doing stop sets with 10 commercials in it. Why don't we shift to a more product placement model?" And it was just an idea, and they all were like, "That's a great idea." So I'm doing product placement, but they still got 10 units. So I mean, instead of, but
man, yeah.
Now you listen to a podcast. There's 2 spots at the beginning, you get a spot in the middle, and they're making money. Figure it out.
Yeah, it's nuts. We used to have such long spot breaks at WQAM when they first got going, and they were doing very well from a numerology standpoint, and also making money. The stop sets were long enough. I was on with Joe Rose and Steve Goldstein in the mornings as the first team, and we used to go out and play 3 innings of stickball outside. And then get back in, and there was still 6 minutes left during the break. It's like, I think you had a man on third. We'd go back outside and start playing ball again. It was
Jeff. Oh, you know what they did to me? And I told them, you can't do this. They put a cash box, and for people watching, a cash box is something that literally takes all the dead air out. So all the timing, everything you've sculpted and constructed for the hour of radio that you're doing is gone, man. So I'm talking like this. I'm Phil Hendrie, and you're really not talking fast. There's no dead air, and so it's like this. I said to them, "You got to stop doing that, man, or I'm about to blow my fucking brains out on the air." Okay? Because you're taking all this really hard work that we're doing, and you're destroying it because you want to add 3 more minutes of commercials. That shows you exactly what these jackasses thought of talent. Are you guys really doing something good? Yeah, kind of. Oh, we're just trying to find more airtime to shove another commercial into your hours. So. I remember being suicidal over that. And,
Yeah, I'm still living that nightmare on a daily basis. But you know what?
Decision making. Yeah.
They're cash boxing. They're cash boxing you now.
I mean, I mean, I complain. I'll say, hey, man, there seem to be a lot of commercials today, and someone will send me an email back and say, well, it's a high volume week. Like,
yeah,
what does that mean? And then you're going to say to me, hey, your numbers were down last month. Yeah, it was a high volume week. Maybe
there's always cleansing terminology.
What are you doing on the show that they're not liking? They like my content. They don't like 15 commercials in a row. But hey, man,
I know it.
Phil, Luby's telling me, wait a minute, this guy's he's far to the right. Everything he talks about is some kind of conservative BS. He's got to be a Trumpster. And I told Luby, I said that can't possibly be the case. I mean, you must have him confused with Tony Bruno or something. But you have to be getting just massive amounts of material of what's happening in politics today, Phil.
I stay away from politics now, bro.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I'm a Democrat. I'm a lifelong liberal. But during the Iraq War, I got all pissed off after 9/11, and I was in favor of the Iraq War. I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. I just turned into what they called a 9/11 Democrat. But basically, I've been a lib my whole life. But the Trump thing. That cat is so fucking weird. He's beyond parody. He's beyond caricature. There's nothing you can, there's nothing you can do.
For you.
The closest I got to making fun of Trump was we did a thing called, as you like to hear him. We're interviewing Donald Trump, but I didn't change my voice. It was just my voice,
Yeah.
Mr. President, how are you doing? I'm fine. Now, you basically stab everybody in the back, right? That's correct. That's just like this shit. And you sell out everybody. Do you like kids? No, I don't. I don't like kids. And animals, you hate animals. Oh, well, I don't hate them. I just don't like animals. I don't like animals or kids. And do you like people? Not much. That was the closest we got. But even that, these Trumpers are.
Oh, they're nuts.
They're. It's like a cult, man. So
I learned my lesson the hard way when the shooting happened at Stoneman Douglas at Parkland, and I went on the air, and I went ballistic because my son was in high school at the time. We played that school in lacrosse, and I mean we knew families and people. It gut wrenched me, and I went on the air and complained about the assault weapons, and I don't know what happened, but my audience turned on me. I'm like, okay, I'm not allowed to have an opinion about that stuff anymore, so I just go comedy. I just don't even bother. It doesn't make it. It's not worth it.
I mean, I think you can. Your art can be informed by what a fucking crazy ass liberal you are, without even talking about politics. Just be fucking weird, I mean, that's what I do. I just make everybody uncomfortable.
Well, I was listening to a podcast with Jimmy Fallon, and he's like, and Willie Geist was like, so are you not doing? You don't do any politics? He goes, nah, the other guys do that. He goes, I don't bother. And it was smart. And listen, Kimmel's doing one thing, Colbert's doing the other. If I'm Jimmy Fallon, I'm not touching it.
Yeah. Kimmel's great. Kimmel's got great writers. He's got a really good Jimmy Kimmel just went all in right from the gate. And I think it sounds great. It looks great. And the same thing with the Colbert and those cats. They're doing political humor, and people accept it from them because I think they've been doing it from day one, but for guys
Colbert.
like us,
naturally, the sports stations were not big fans of getting into politics, which became a very popular thing in the first run of Donald Trump for the presidency, because it was so absurd, as you said, that you couldn't make this shit up. And I always felt this way, and I'm sure you guys do too. But I mean, you have to operate within the parameters of what's going to keep you working. But
hey, guys,
I was like, you have to be yourself, like you were talking about, Phil and Paul. That if this is your belief, then go ahead and express it. And as long as you're fair to other people or whatever, within reason, then,
it's
then
just
it was part of the program. It was part of the fabric of what your show was all about.
We're in another dimension now, because I was at the White House for Christmas this year, and I posted a picture. I'm at the White House. How cool is that? And I'm shaking hands with Biden, and I'm like, this is the greatest thing. As a kid who grew up in America, to meet the president, like some goofy DJ from Brooklyn, I live in Florida. I'm like, and people just destroyed me. I'm like, wow, what happened, man? It's the president.
Yeah.
Well, we have male audiences. I've got a high male audience. You do too.
Yeah.
And we probably got a lot of white guys. You know where I'm going with this, man. It's a certain political thing there. But I mean, that's too bad, man. Going to the White House and meeting a president, any president, almost any president, should be a real great thing. But people are.
The wine was. I was disappointed in the wine, though. I fully expected it to be I fully expected it to be the best wine I ever had, but no, the food was unbelievable. Just walking around there, I got goosebumps. I walked in, and a Marine opens the door and he says, "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the White House." And I just welled up with tears, and I was like, "Wow!" It was the neatest thing.
What was the occasion? You were drafting in behind the Eagles?
It was a Christmas party.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was,
I thought maybe you were representing yourself, as a member of the Stanley Cup winning Florida Panthers. Or something.
Right,
Yeah.
man.
You got in on a ticket there. Act like you belong. Just walk in there as if you were Matt Tkachuk, right?
Speaking of that, I have been a Panther fan because, I don't know if you know this, Defo, but Jackie Bales, remember Jackie from the news department? She and I have hooked up, and we're kind of doing a bi-coastal weird thing, but I've taken her to a bunch of Panther games when I'm down in Miami, and we just loved them. And this past season, when they won the Stanley Cup, was so fucking cool.
Yes.
And you mentioned Goldstein. I watch him here on Bally Sports here in California.
Nice evolution that he made.
Huh?
He made a nice evolution. I mean, and that was another example. You were talking about how hard you work. I know, Polyman, you work your ass off too. Although we were getting there at 5:59:50 for a 6:00 start.
No chance.
The elevator. We couldn't afford to run out of gas going up the stairs.
But then here's what happens, And then I see at this Four Nations tournament, Matthew Tkachuk is a trumper, and I'm like, all of a sudden, really, dude? I mean, that kind of just soured my whole.
You're hoping he loses a couple of teeth with a puck to the face.
Hey, Phil, I was listening in when you guys were talking earlier, and your live show, and you were talking about maybe you could find a theater down here, dude. I know the people. I know the guy. I know a guy. I mean, you should go.
A guy.
The Broward Center, and because my friends over at they run it, and I mean, let's connect, and maybe I can.
How many seats? How many seats is the Broward Center? Like
they have a couple of smaller rooms too. They have like a 600 seater. And then they have the big giant room. So, I mean, and then they have the Parker Playhouse, which is a fantastic room. A lot of stand-ups that are going to the next level use that room. So, that's another
fun. I think that's the next thing I want to do. I want to do Miami and.
Well, you've got to. You got a legion of fans down here that talk about you all the time. Everybody's like, "Hey, Paul, you're on radio. You know Phil Hendrie?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't." Now I do. Now I'm.
Hook him in there. We saw Paul Mercurio there, and I'm. Not really a big frequent visitor to the Broward Center for the Performing Arts there, and I hadn't been in that theater, and it was a perfect size, really, for what he was doing.
Although nice room, right?
That all of us can relate to, that you would think was an insane idea, and it was almost as if he had turned the show over to callers.
It was unbelievable.
So he was dragging people out of the audience.
It's funny you said that, Defo, because I'm watching him do this show. He calls it Permission to Speak, and he blindly pulls people from the audience up onto the stage, and he weaves their lives together. And it's freaking hilarious because it's funny in this era, people are willing to say anything. There was an 80-year-old woman on stage that was talking about her choice of vibrators and how she liked the porno from the 70s better. I mean, it was unbelievable. Gay couples, and it was just really neat. And I'm thinking, people just want to tell their stories, and I'm trying to figure out a way to get that same feeling onto a radio show. But you try to do it at 6:00 in the morning is a little different. With no booze.
If you're booking Phil Hendrie into the Broward Center, I want a piece. I want a piece of this, Paulie, man. I know you're going to be making money.
I'm not going to make it.
Don't count on getting paid either if you're involved with the
I'm just trying to get a dinner with Phil Hendrie and you.
Well, we got to get together. I'm going to be down there in about 3 weeks, man.
Oh,
I'm
please.
I'm up in Melbourne. We're going to come down. Yeah, we should definitely have dinner and
awesome,
and drink.
Tom Bernard is another great radio personality from he's up
Twin
in
Cities.
Palm Beach. He's in Palm Beach Gardens now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And Brother Weeze from Rochester is living down here and doing his show. So everybody's like, screw the Northeast. All right, let's come to Florida. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Bernard left Minnesota, huh?
He left Minnesota. He's working down here. Yeah, I think he still kept a house up there, but he's down here. Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about the coldest things. Well, I was anyway, that we've seen in the business. And one of them involved your show, Paulie, man. When how long were you working with young Ron?
We did 28 years, yeah.
Okay, so Phil, picture this. I mean, you probably witnessed something similar. So they give young Ron the news that his best option was to leave the building immediately. All right, so I'm coming outside. They probably called Paulie Man in for a meeting. Well, here's the way the show's going to go from now on. I don't know, what.
No,
what
none of that happened. It was basically he was done. And they offered. In fact, it was an unbelievable deal because he got paid off. He did his contract. he couldn't have been happier when he left.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, but
I just thought I was a witness to the cruelty because he hadn't even left the building. His car had just like left the parking lot, I guess. And they
but
were already with a roller paint, a brush, rolling over his name on the
now
company.
that's true. Yeah.
So
But
it,
now,
it said the Paul and Young Ron show, and then it just said the Paul show.
well, and let me tell you something. And I'm going to say this to any young radio personalities coming up: if you have something good, like my ego said, I don't need. If he leaves, I'm Paul Castronovo. I've been here for 30. Well, you really need chemistry, and it took me a long time to recover from. I brought in a couple of people that didn't work out, and boy, the audience let me know. I remember all the corporate bigwigs were like, "Don't pay attention to what they're saying on Facebook." I'm like, "Okay, you read it," because
I know.
they were killing me, and I'm like, "I don't think they like it." And guess what? One night they called me, they go, "Hey, you were right. It's not working, so we're gonna get rid of this and regroup." And thank God we did. Now we've recovered, but it was a tough few years.
I mean, this is going to sound really strange, but that's, I think, why, not why, but that's how, when I started doing these character voices and interacting with them, I know it's because, well, wait a minute, I don't have the time to hire other actors to do this shit. I'll just do it myself. That's what happens,
It's
a lot easier to get a guest that way, and you're not even dealing with the thing that you're saying, Paul, is very real. You got to find somebody you really have chemistry with, and they got a whole life, and they got all their problems, and they got all their shit. So I just
my comedy, everything I do that's funny is reactionary. So I need interesting people around me to say something that I can fire off on, and that's what makes me funny. Like some of the Letterman stuff that I've watched, everything I've watched Letterman, and the way he reacts to other people is just genius. And I started, going back to Carson and being a fan of Carson, and then Letterman. That's where and George Carlin. That's where I came from.
Amazing run by Paul Castronovo, though. I mean, here's Phil Hendrie in the Radio Hall of Fame. And Paulie, man, how many years has it been on Big 105?
By the way, this is year 41 in Miami.
Wow.
41 years in Miami.
41 years.
In Miami, yeah. I started in 84. So I got a couple of years before that. So, we'll see how long.
We're going to put your name up there for the Hall of Fame, man. God damn it. Some of the people that got in there, James Dobson. But anyway.
You know what? Don Anthony sent me an email from the Talent Masters. I don't know if you know Don. Puts on Morning Show Boogie. He sent me an email saying he was nominating me this year. So
man, good.
Yeah, knock on wood. Yeah, that kind of stuff means a lot.
I'll tell you,
when you get older, it means a lot.
It means a lot, man. At Firesign Theater, they ought to be nominated. I don't know why the hell they are.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I know Phil Proctor here in LA. Phil is a wonderful guy, and those cats influenced me heavily, man, with the comedy they did. Maybe people think they're too maybe they think they're a stage act as opposed to a radio show, but I found them on radio. I thought they're brilliant. So there's a lot of people that belong there.
Well, essentially, we're putting these albums out that we were all getting stoned early on in our history of smoking weed.
Yes.
National Lampoon
100 times, and it was fantastic.
The first time I heard National Lampoon, that's not funny, that's sick. I thought to myself, this is what I want to do for a living. And it was Bill Murray and the early Saturday Night Live guys.
So you were saying this Dobson guy is like the Lynn Swan of the Radio Hall of Fame, where everybody goes, "How the hell did he get in there? He made one catch." That was the guy that mentioned that. He kind of
Dobson.
Yeah,
I don't understand it. Fucking James Dobson is focused on the family. This is an example of why radio is struggling, because they do that frivolous bullshit that means nothing. That I don't know. James Dobson is a religious show. I'm not knocking it, but it's not. It doesn't belong in the Radio Hall of Fame.
Radio Hall of Fame.
Now,
what does belong in there is Catherine Kuhlman. As I often tell
this
story.
Believe in miracles.
My first experience was I was doing a talk show at some station in Corona, California, KREL. And it was mostly a religious station. I'm on with a guy named Bob Harvey, who brought me in to do 12 o'clock until 3 in the morning doing sports talk on the station. We're buying the time there. And finally, the general manager calls us in. He says, "I love you guys, but I got to let you go." And we said, "Really? I mean, you just said you love the show. It's doing real well." He goes, "No, I got to let you go. You're losing in the ratings. You're getting buried by Catherine Kuhlman."
You're getting buried.
Well, what's wrong with losing to Catherine Kuhlman? She's like a world-renowned evangelist. He says she's been dead for 5 years.
All right.
We were losing to her tapes. With that, I want to say I can't thank you guys enough. I wish we could do this longer. And Paulie, man, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure. Big 105.9, Paulie, man. Are we still doing 6 to 10?
Yeah, morning, yeah, 6 to 10. And you know, the neat thing
Okay.
is we're on the iHeartRadio app, so I have people. My son is listening. He's skiing in France, and he's listening to his dad.
All
That's
right.
pretty cool. Yeah. So
Oh, yeah, no,
the
that
app
was
has
always
really
big.
made us worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can always tell the PD when they come in and question your numbers. Well, we're doing great on the app, but
Well, wait a minute. We don't have a PD. They blew my guy out. So this is the
that's a
first
dream
time in my
situation. What are you talking about?
first time in my career I don't have a program director. I was at this summer. I was at a convention, and I get home. I had dinner with my PD, and then we get back, and they blew him out. And now I'm like, well, who's the PD? They go, well, we're gonna have there's a group of guys in the corporate that
Yeah.
are gonna oversee the station.
We don't really
There you
need
go.
one.
Yeah.
Figure that
But
out.
these
Okay.
guys manage a Miami station from California somewhere, and
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
they're definitely relating and owning their audience. Phil, can't thank you enough, man, brother. It was good catching
Oh,
up
man, it
with
was
you.
great, man. Thank you.
Classic. Used to pee in my pants, Paulie, man, watching this guy perform.
Oh,
He's
I
doing
can
a radio
imagine.
show,
Yeah.
and
Thank you for
I had to
everything.
follow him. That was the tough part, right? And get the sports audience going there on WIOD. And it took me a half hour to compose myself after laughing my ass off watching this guy do his thing. So, Phil, thank you so much, Paulie,
Hey,
man.
thanks, man.
A pleasure, man. Thank you so much for
Put
joining
us
us.
Hey,
together
Paul.
when you come to Miami. Let's have
I
dinner. I'm
will.
buying. All right, buddy.
Yeah.
We do. We have to do that. Yeah,
And if
for
I could
sure.
get out of this stiff of a condo I'm in, I'll be living in Melbourne. So maybe I'll be up there.
Okay.
The price
Sounds
keeps
good, brother.
dropping as the buildings keep falling into the ocean. So it's not a good situation.
What's going on there, man? Be careful, dude. Don't
Yeah.
have a building fall on your ass.
It's the homeowners association. It's worse than dealing with the mafia. I mean, it really is. I've had loan sharks that were more pleasant to deal with than these guys. Thanks, guys, so much. Phil Hendrie, ladies and gentlemen, Radio Hall of
Later, man.
Fame. Paul Castronovo, legendary. I mean, I'm talking 40
Oh yeah.
years in Miami radio. Just an incredible run here. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this.